I spent 2 years buying back the house my parents lost the year I turned 12, and I never told a single person outside of my younger brother until the morning I handed my mother the keys. Not my husband. Not my best friend. Not even my father, who still drove past that house sometimes on Sunday afternoons, the way you revisit a place where something important got left behind. My name is Faye Caldwell. I'm 34 years old. I work as a registered nurse supervisor at a regional hospital in Ohio, and for the last 26 months, every dollar I didn't absolutely need went into a savings account I named, simply, home. Let me tell you what that house meant before I tell you what happened to it. My parents, Jim and Beverly Caldwell, bought that house in 1994 with a down payment my father had been saving since before I was born. It was a 2-story Craftsman on Maple Birch Lane in a small town outside Columbus. White exciting green shutters, a front porch wide enough to fit a porch swing, and 3 kids' bikes. My father planted a dogwood tree in the front yard the spring after they moved in because my mother had always wanted one. I grew up watching that tree bloom every April and thinking that was just what yards did. When I was 12, my father got laid off from the auto parts plant where he'd worked for 14 years. He found work again eventually. Always did. But not fast enough, and not at the same pay. By the time I was 15, the house was gone, a short sale. My parents split the difference between devastation and practicality the way they split everything, quietly in front of the kids without complaint. We moved into a rental 2 neighborhoods over. My mother never once mentioned the dogwood tree again. But I did. I thought about it constantly. I thought about it through nursing school, through every overnight shift I picked up to pay down my student loans faster, through every year of my marriage to my husband, Kevin. I thought about it the way you think about something you've decided you're going to fix someday, even before you know how. The how came together slowly. Kevin and I had a dual income, no children yet, and I had made a habit of living beneath my means since the years when my means were extremely limited. I picked up extra shifts. I took on a per diem contract at a second facility 2 weekends a month. And I watched the MLS listings for Maple Birch Lane with the kind of focus most people reserve for things they actually believe might happen. It happened 14 months in. The house came on the market in February of last year. Same green shutters. The dogwood tree, now 30 years old and enormous, still standing in the front yard. Listed at $312,000. I called my brother Patrick from the hospital parking lot at 6 in the morning after a 12-hour night shift, voice barely above a whisper so I wouldn't start crying in public, and said, "It's back. We're doing this." Patrick, who lives in Pittsburgh, co-signed on nothing and paid nothing, but he has always been my logistics person. He is the one who keeps secrets airtight and coordinates moving parts without letting his face give anything away. He managed the communication with the real estate attorney. He helped me draft the plan, and he agreed, without me even asking, that this was between the two of us until the moment it wasn't. My parents' 45th wedding anniversary was in late April. That gave me roughly 10 weeks to close, which we did in 39 days. The plan was this. I would tell my parents we were celebrating their anniversary with a weekend trip back to Columbus. Dinner Friday night, brunch Saturday morning, a drive through the old neighborhood for sentiment. My father had been talking about wanting to drive past Maple Birch Lane again, and I knew he'd think nothing of it if I suggested we make a whole trip out of it. I arranged for Patrick to fly in from Pittsburgh. I hired a small catering company to set up a late lunch on the property. I had a local florist do something simple with the front porch. White flowers, nothing fussy, the kind of thing my mother would have chosen herself. And I had a frame made, printed, and wrapped. The original deed to the house from 1994, a copy of the new deed in my parents' names, and a photo of the 4 of us standing in front of that dogwood tree the spring they first moved in, the one my father took with a self-timer because we couldn't afford a photographer. My husband, Kevin, knew none of this until the Wednesday before the weekend. I told him over dinner. I laid it out plainly. The account, the purchase, the plan, and I watched his face move through about 6 different expressions in 30 seconds. He's not a flashy person. He doesn't emote in large gestures. But he reached across the table and covered my hand with his and said, "That's the most you thing you've ever done." Which from Kevin is a declaration of profound respect. He offered to help with setup. He offered to drive. He cleared his schedule for the entire weekend without me asking him to. And then he mentioned, casually, that his parents, his mother Constance and his stepfather Ron, had already been planning to be in Columbus that same weekend to visit Ron's sister, and wouldn't it be nice if we all had dinner together Saturday evening after the big reveal? I said that sounded fine. I said I'd check the timing and we'd make it work. And I didn't think about it again for 3 days, because I was focused on the thing I had been building toward for 26 months, and I trusted that a dinner with in-laws was a manageable footnote to the main event. That was my mistake. Not a small one. I need to give you some context about my mother-in-law before I go further, because without it, what happened next seems random. It was not random. It was consistent with a pattern I had watched play out for the entire 8 years Kevin and I had been together. Constance Hartley is a woman who has never once in my presence said something straightforwardly kind without attaching a condition to it. She told me at our rehearsal dinner that my dress was beautiful, and then added that she'd always pictured Kevin with someone a little more put together, professionally. I was at the time 3 semesters into nursing school and working 30 hours a week at a hospital cafeteria to pay for it. She called nursing a lovely support career once, in front of Kevin's entire extended family at Christmas, while Ron nodded beside her like a bobblehead. She made a comment 2 years ago about how Kevin's salary was carrying us while I was still building up my career, despite the fact that I had been a full-time nurse supervisor for 4 years by that point, and we had always split expenses exactly down the middle. She didn't say these things with venom. She said them with the particular politeness of a woman who has decided that the rules of basic courtesy don't apply to her assessments of other people's children-in-law. I had tolerated it because Kevin was conflict-averse with his mother, in the specific way people are conflict-averse with parents, who made them feel like nothing they did was quite good enough. Which is to say, he absorbed it rather than addressing it. And I had decided that was a wound I couldn't heal for him and not worth fighting about separately from whatever I was already managing, so. Saturday morning. My parents arrived at our hotel. We had all stayed the Friday night in Columbus, dressed for the occasion the way they always dressed when something felt important. My mother in a cream blouse and the small pearl earrings she saved for things that mattered. My father in his good sport coat. Both of them smiling at the idea of driving through the old neighborhood, completely unaware that the old neighborhood was now theirs. Patrick was already at the house. The catering team was setting up the back patio. The flowers were on the porch. I had the wrapped frame in the trunk. Kevin was quiet in the driver's seat. Not a bad quiet, a held breath kind of quiet. He kept glancing at me in the passenger mirror, and I kept giving him the small nod that meant not yet. Keep driving, we're almost there. When we turned onto Maple Birch Lane, my father sat up straighter. I saw it in the rearview mirror, this immediate shift in his posture, the way the body remembers things the mind tries to store carefully. My mother said softly, "Oh, Jimmy," and my father put his hand over hers. We pulled into the driveway. My mother saw the flowers first. Then the catering table through the side yard gate. Then she saw Patrick standing on the front porch with his hands in his pockets and a look on his face that he absolutely could not keep neutral. And she said, "What is happening right now?" And then I saw what else was on the front porch. Constance. She was standing at the far end of the porch swing, holding what looked like a glass of iced tea, wearing a sundress like she was hosting a garden party. Ron was seated in one of the porch chairs, my porch chairs, that I had ordered from a home goods store and had delivered and assembled with Kevin's help on Thursday, and he gave a small wave at the car like he was greeting guests at his own home. I did not understand for a half second what I was seeing. I understood it very quickly after that. I got out of the car first. My mother was still processing. My father was helping her with her door, murmuring something I couldn't hear. Kevin came around the front of the car and stopped when he saw his mother on the porch, and I watched the color drain out of his face in a way that told me this was not something he had arranged. "Constance," I said, and I kept my voice very even, the same way I keep my voice even in the hospital when something has gone wrong and I need my team to stay functional. "What are you doing here?" She turned with a smile that had clearly been prepared in advance. "Kevin mentioned the address last week when he called to tell us about your weekend plans." I knew the house, obviously. He'd told us about your project. She said the word project with a particular inflection. "Ron and I thought it might be nice to come by and help get things ready. We brought some things from home." She gestured toward the front door, which was open. I looked through it. There were boxes. Not catering supplies, not decorating materials. Personal boxes, the kind with handwriting on the side indicating contents. I could see a standing lamp that was not mine positioned next to the stairwell. A row of framed photographs leaning against the hallway wall that I had never seen in my life. My mother had made it to the bottom porch step by then. She was smiling still, The reflexive social smile she wears when she's in a situation she doesn't understand but is trying to be gracious about. She looked at Constance, and she looked at the open door, and she said, "Oh, is this the property? It's lovely." Constance looked at my mother with an expression that I can only describe as assessment, the kind of look you give someone you have already decided is not in the relevant category of people, and said, "Yes, it's coming together beautifully. We've been here since yesterday getting it in order." Since yesterday. Since yesterday, I took one breath. Then I walked past Constance onto the porch and through the front door of the house I had purchased with 26 months of night shifts and skipped vacations and alone against my own retirement savings. And I stood in the entryway looking at a lamp that wasn't mine next to a staircase that was mine, and I made a decision. I walked back outside. Patrick had come down from the porch by then and was standing near my parents with his jaw locked in a way that meant he was furious and containing it. My father had his hand on my mother's elbow, and I could see from his face that he had started to understand something was wrong even if he didn't know what. Kevin was standing at the bottom of the porch steps, looking at his mother with an expression I had never seen on him in 8 years. It wasn't anger yet. It was the look that comes before anger, the look of someone sorting very rapidly through what they know, identifying where the breach happened, calculating what it means. "Mom," he said, and his voice was different, quieter, deliberate. "Did you bring your things into this house?" "We brought a few items," Constance said. "The plan was to help get it ready before." "Before what?" Kevin said. "Before Faye's parents arrived? Before the surprise that has nothing to do with you?" Constance blinked. This was not the response she had prepared for. "Kevin, we thought. You knew the address because I told you we were coming to Columbus. I didn't invite you to the house. I didn't give you a key. The door was open when the catering people." "Mom." He said it once, flat and final. "Whose name is on the deed to this property?" Silence. "Whose name?" "Faye's," she said very quietly. "Then this is Faye's house, and Faye bought it as a gift for her parents. And you drove here without telling either of us, let yourself in through an open door, and started moving your belongings into a home that has never once in any conversation been offered to you." He stopped. "Did you think we wouldn't notice?" Ron cleared his throat. "Son, we were only trying to— I'm not asking you right now, Ron." In 8 years, I had never heard Kevin speak to his stepfather that way. In 8 years, I had never heard Kevin speak to either of his parents that way. I had wanted to, on their behalf and my own, approximately 40 times. I had watched him deflect and minimize and redirect. I had watched him absorb an excuse and smooth over. I had told myself it wasn't my wound to push on. It turned out he had been saving it. Not for me, not because of me, but because something about watching his mother stand on my parents' porch, in my porch chairs, holding a glass of iced tea in a house she had let herself into through a catering company's unlocked door, while my mother stood in the front yard in her pearl earrings thinking this was a regular property tour. Something about that particular scene had finally located the floor of what he was willing to tolerate, and he had walked through it. I went inside and I started carrying boxes out. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Methodically, the way I move at work when a situation requires efficiency over emotion. Box by box, out the front door and onto the driveway. The lamp, the framed photographs, a basket of what appeared to be throw pillows. Patrick appeared beside me without a word and picked up the heavier items. Kevin joined us within 2 minutes. Ron eventually appeared in the doorway looking mortified, and started carrying his own belongings to their car, which was parked halfway down the block in what I realized, with a clarity that was almost funny, was probably not a coincidence. You don't park halfway down the block from a house where you have every right to be. Constance stood on the porch the entire time, watching. She made one more attempt, directed at me rather than Kevin, when I came out with the last box. "Faye, I want you to know that my intention was never to overstep." She paused. "I've always thought of Kevin's future as something we were building together as a family. This house, the investment, the stability. I simply thought— You thought a home I purchased with my own income, as a gift for my parents, was something that belonged to your family's future," I said. "I wasn't asking." She didn't answer. "My parents have been married for 45 years, I said. My father worked in a factory for 2 decades. My mother stretched a grocery budget for a family of 4 through a layoff and a short sale, and never complained where the kids could hear her. This house belonged to them 22 years ago, and they lost it for reasons that had nothing to do with whether they deserved it. I spent 2 years giving it back. I set the last box down in the driveway. That is not an investment. That is a debt. And it was never, at any point in any conversation, yours to calculate." She left 10 minutes later. The caterers, to their absolute credit, had kept the back patio setup running through the entire thing. The flowers were still on the porch. Patrick had somehow managed to reset the living room to its correct configuration and rehang a small wreath I'd put on the door, which had been knocked sideways at some point. Kevin found me in the kitchen, which still smelled faintly like fresh paint from when I'd had it touched up the week before closing. He stood in the doorway for a moment. He didn't try to explain his mother or minimize what she'd done or ask me to consider her perspective. He said, "I'm sorry it started like that. I want to fix it." "You already did," I told him. "On the porch." He nodded. Then he went outside to help my brother relight the string lights that had been jostled loose during the box shuffle, and I stood in the kitchen of my parents' house for a moment alone, looking at the dogwood tree through the window above the sink. Older now, wide and tall and absolutely fixed in the ground, and I let myself feel the full weight of what I had been carrying toward for 2 years. Then I went to get my parents. My mother had been waiting in the front yard with a patience I now understand she has been practicing her entire adult life. My father was beside her. They thought, still, that something had gone wrong with the surprise and that we were sorting it out, the way practical people assume hiccups are hiccups until someone tells them otherwise. I brought them onto the porch. I sat them down on the swing together. Patrick came and stood to my right. Kevin stood to my left. And I took out the wrapped frame from where I'd kept it safely in the trunk of the car through all of it, and I handed it to my mother. She looked at me. "Faye, open it." She unwrapped it slowly, the way she wraps and unwraps everything. Carefully, like the paper itself has value. When she saw what was inside, she went very still. The original deed, the new deed, the photograph. "I don't understand," she said, though I could see from her face that she was beginning to. "The dogwood tree is 30 years old," I said. "It's been here the whole time. I thought you should be here with it." My father leaned over to look at what my mother was holding. He looked at it for a long moment without speaking. Then he stood up from the swing, slowly, because his knees aren't what they were, and he walked to the porch railing and stood with his hands wrapped around it, looking at the front yard, looking at that tree. He didn't say anything for a while. That's how he's always been. He processes the things that matter most by going quiet and looking at them. My mother was crying. Not the sharp, startled crying of the earlier part of the afternoon. This was the other kind. The kind that comes when something you stopped letting yourself want has appeared in front of you unexpectedly, and your body needs a moment to catch up with the fact that it's real. "You did this," she said finally, looking up at me. Not a question. "It took a while," I said. She pulled me down to her on the swing and held on longer than she usually does. And I let her, and I didn't say anything else, because there wasn't anything else that needed to be said. We ate lunch on the back patio while the afternoon light did that thing it does in April. That gold-leaning, generous thing that makes everything feel like a photograph of itself. My father talked more than he usually does. He told the caterers where the house had the best light in the mornings. He remembered where the previous owners had kept a vegetable garden along the south fence and said he thought he might try to start one there again this summer. My mother spent 20 minutes on the front porch by herself at one point, just sitting, and when she came back inside, her eyes were dry and her face was settled in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Kevin's mother sent a text that evening. I didn't read it until the next day. It said in full, "I hope you understand I meant well." I read it once and put the phone down and went back to the kitchen where my father was helping Patrick figure out how the new coffee maker worked, and I decided that understanding her intentions was something I could examine another time, on a day that wasn't this one. What I kept coming back to in the weeks after was not the confrontation. It was not constant standing on the porch in my chairs or the boxes or the lamp she had positioned next to the stairwell, as if she was already imagining which wall the couch would go against. It was not even Kevin's voice when he finally said what I had watched him not say for 8 years. What I kept coming back to was my father's hands on the porch railing. The way he stood there for a long time, not performing anything, not saying what he thought he was supposed to say. Just a man looking at a yard where 30 years ago he planted a tree because his wife had always wanted one, and where the tree had stayed even when everything else had to go, and where he was, finally, allowed to stay too. 45 years of marriage. A lifetime of giving things quietly without expectation of return. And a dogwood tree in April, blooming like it had never stopped waiting for them to come back. That's what I was paying for, all along. Not the house. Not the deed. Not the address on Maple Birch Lane. The look on my father's face when he realized something he'd lost had been waiting for him, and that his daughter had spent 2 years making sure it would be there when he came back for it. If you've ever done something for your parents that they'll never fully know the cost of, the late nights, the skipped things, the years of pointing every spare dollar toward a single quiet goal, then you already know exactly what that porch looked like in the late afternoon light on an April Saturday. And if you haven't done it yet, I hope you get the chance.